While on vacation in London, a young woman posed in front of Tower Bridge with her father for a photo, hoping to capture a lovely family moment. But when she later took a closer look at the picture, she noticed something shocking and immediately began to panic. This one image would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. The crisp morning air carried the scent of the River Thames as Elisha Ellie Gibson strolled along the Queen's Walk in Southwark, London. At 18 years old, Ellie was experiencing the vibrant city for the first time, her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the sights alongside her father, Henry Gibson. They had just finished their morning walk and were heading back to their Airbnb apartment on Bermondsey Street. Ellie's gaze swept across the sparkling river, a contented smile playing on her lips. "Dad," she said, turning to Henry, "we should do more trips like this as a family. It's been amazing so far." Henry chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, sweetheart, we've pretty much emptied out our holiday savings jar for this one. If you want to plan another trip next year, you might need to cut back on that online shopping habit of yours." He winked teasingly. Ellie laughed, the sound light and carefree. "That sounds fair. I don't mind cutting down on shopping if it means we get to do this again with you and Mom." As they continued their leisurely pace, the iconic Tower Bridge came into view, its majestic structure framed against the bright blue sky. Ellie's attention was drawn to a man standing nearby with a sleek photo booth, the kind she'd often seen at her friends' weddings and events. The man, noticing their American accents, approached with a friendly smile. "Hello there. How about a lovely souvenir photo? My booth can print on magnetic surfaces instantly, and I'll throw in a digital copy too, only £9.99 for the both of you." Ellie's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, Dad, can we? It would be perfect to remember this day." Henry nodded, unable to resist his daughter's enthusiasm. "All right, let's do it." They posed together, Henry hugging Ellie from behind as they leaned against the iron railing near a lamppost. The Tower Bridge and the river provided a picturesque backdrop, capturing a sweet father-daughter moment. The photo booth whirred to life, quickly printing out the magnetic photo. Henry paid the man and accepted the print. But as he looked at it, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. He quickly tucked the picture into his pocket. "Can I see it, Dad? Did we look good?" Ellie asked, reaching for her phone as the cameraman offered to send the digital copy. "Let's head back now, sweetheart," Henry said, his tone slightly hurried. "We'll have a look at the apartment. Your mum's waiting, and we've been out since morning." As they made their way to the Airbnb, Ellie couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something about her father's reaction to the photo felt off. Did he not like it? Or was he hesitant to spend more money to take another shot? She chose to set those thoughts aside and focus on the excitement of exploring more of London with her parents. After all, if the photo turned out to be a disappointment, they could always return later to take more pictures, since their apartment was just a 5-minute walk away. They arrived at their apartment on Bermondsey Street, a cozy space that had become their temporary home for a week. Lisa Gibson, Ellie's mother, greeted them warmly as they entered. "How was the morning walk?" Lisa asked, having just finished tidying up their luggage. "Did you bring me some breakfast?" Henry produced a paper bag with a fresh croissant inside, placing it on the table. Ellie, still buzzing with excitement from their photo session, flopped onto the couch and pulled out her phone. Lisa noticed her daughter's enthusiasm and turned to Henry with a questioning look. "What's got her so excited?" "We took a picture together at Queen's Walk," Henry explained. "There was a man with a portable photo booth that printed a magnetic copy." From her spot on the couch, Ellie called out playfully, "Dad's being sneaky, keeping the magnetic copy to himself and leaving me with just the digital one." Henry retorted with a grin, "Hey, at least you have the digital copy to post on social media." "You know me too well, Dad," Ellie replied, already engrossed in her phone as she prepared to share their London adventure with her online friends. The cozy Airbnb apartment buzzed with the quiet energy of a family on vacation. Lisa savored her croissant, while Ellie remained engrossed in her phone, carefully editing the photo for her social media post. Henry, ever the restless soul, glanced around the room with a slight frown. "You know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, "we've accumulated quite a bit of trash already. I think I'll take it down to the garbage chute and maybe get some fresh air while I'm at it." Lisa and Ellie nodded absently, both accustomed to Henry's need for the outdoors. Even back home in the US, he was rarely content to stay inside for long. As Henry gathered the trash and headed out, Ellie continued to work on her photo. She zoomed in, adjusting the contrast and brightness, when something caught her eye. In the background of their picture-perfect moment, a green trash bin stood out like a sore thumb. But it wasn't just the bin that drew her attention. Affixed to it was a missing person flyer. Squinting at the small image, Ellie could make out the face of a little girl. The words, "Still Missing," were boldly printed above the child's photo. A strange sense of familiarity washed over Ellie as she stared at the girl's face, but she couldn't quite place why. Shaking off the odd feeling, Ellie finished her edits and uploaded the photo to her social media account. As she hit post, her mother's voice broke through her concentration. "Ellie, honey, let's go. I'm done with breakfast," Lisa called out after finishing her meal. "You know how impatient your father gets when he's waiting." Ellie quickly tucked her phone into her purse and joined her mother. They exited the apartment, expecting to find Henry waiting in the hallway or lobby, but as they stepped outside, they realized he was nowhere to be seen. Surprisingly, neither Lisa nor Ellie felt particularly worried. They were well acquainted with Henry's tendency to wander off and reappear without warning. He was never a quiet man, after all. "He'll reach out when he's ready," Lisa said with a shrug, and they began to walk along the riverbank. As they strolled, retracing the path Ellie and Henry had taken earlier, they eventually found themselves back at the spot where the photo had been taken. The cameraman was still there, busy with other customers. And there, standing by the trash bin with the missing person flyer, was Henry. To Ellie's surprise, her father was in the process of removing the poster from the bin. She and Lisa approached him, curiosity piqued. "Dear, what are you doing?" Lisa asked, a note of concern in her voice. "Those bins are full of germs." But it was Ellie who voiced the question that had immediately sprung to mind. "Dad, why are you taking down that poster?" Henry's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment he seemed at a loss for words, but then a practiced smile spread across his face. "Oh, this," he said, his voice a touch too casual. "Some poor family must have put this up looking for their lost daughter. I didn't want you to see it and get upset. I know how sensitive you are about things like that." He chuckled nervously, folding the flyer and tucking it into his jacket's pocket. "It reminded me of those old news stories back in the States, the ones that always freaked you out as a kid. You used to have nightmares about kidnappings, remember?" Ellie frowned, a nagging feeling of unease settling in her stomach. Her father's explanation seemed odd, almost rehearsed. Why would he remove the flyer instead of just ignoring it? And how did he know about it before they did? But as Lisa fussed over Henry, pouring sanitizer on his hands and suggesting they continue their exploration of London, Ellie pushed her doubts aside. It was silly to overthink her father's actions, she told herself. He was probably just doing his random fatherly thing, being overprotective in his own peculiar way. Still, as they set off to discover more of the city, Ellie couldn't quite shake the image of the little girl's face from her mind. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets of London as the Gibson family continued their exploration. The city's vibrant energy pulsed around them, and any earlier suspicions in Ellie's mind had subsided, replaced by the excitement of their adventure. Hours slipped by in a blur of sightseeing, each moment filled with laughter and wonder as they embraced the beauty of their surroundings. As the clock tower of Big Ben chimed 1 p.m., Henry's stomach growled. He checked his watch, the familiar gesture somehow seeming more deliberate than usual. "I'm getting hungry," he announced, his voice carrying a forced casualness. "Let's find a place to grab some food." While Henry and Lisa scanned the area, their eyes darting from one quaint cafe to another, Ellie trailed behind them. Her attention was fixed on her phone, the bright screen a stark contrast to the muted tones of the historic city around her. The notifications from her earlier post had exploded, a constant stream of likes and comments demanding her attention. As she scrolled, her thumb hovering over the screen, one particular comment made her heart skip a beat. It was from her best friend back home, the words jumping out at her. "OMG, Ellie! That girl in the missing person flyer looks so much like you. It's like seeing your mini-me." Ellie's steps faltered, her mind racing as she reread the comment. The playful tone of her friend's words did little to quell the unease growing in the pit of her stomach. She found herself staring at the photo again, her eyes drawn to the blurry image of the flyer in the background. The little girl's face, barely discernible in the low-resolution picture, seemed to stare back at her with an unsettling familiarity. "Ellie." Henry's voice cut through her thoughts, sharp and urgent. She looked up to see him gesturing towards a charming restaurant, its outdoor seating area adorned with colorful flowers. "How about this place? They have a nice outdoor seating area and it's just across Potter's Fields Park." Ellie nodded absently, forcing a smile as she followed her parents to a fancy table nestled against the building's weathered brick facade. The wrought iron chairs scraped against the pavement as they settled in, the sound grating in Ellie's ears. As her mother perused the menu, her brow furrowed in concentration, Ellie remained engrossed in her phone. Her thumbs flew across the screen as she typed out a reply to her friend, each word carefully chosen to sound casual, to hide the tremor of uncertainty she felt. "Ellie," Henry called again, his voice laced with a concern that seemed oddly intense. "Is everything all right? What are you reading?" Startled by the urgency in his tone, Ellie quickly locked her phone and slipped it back into her purse. "Sorry, Dad, just got distracted," she mumbled, reaching for the menu. As they placed their orders with a cheerful waitress whose accent lilted musically, Ellie's mind kept drifting back to the missing person flyer. The nagging feeling of familiarity she'd experienced earlier had only intensified after reading her friend's comment. The clinking of cutlery against plates and the low hum of conversation from nearby tables faded into the background as Ellie struggled with her thoughts. The warm breeze that ruffled the tablecloth and carried the scent of freshly baked bread from the servers as they placed it on their table did little to ease her growing unease. "Dad?" she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the comfortable silence that had settled over their table. "Can I see that missing child flyer you took down earlier?" The effect of her words was immediate and alarming. Henry's fork clattered against his plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet corner of the restaurant. His face, previously relaxed in the afternoon sun, tightened visibly. "The flyer?" he repeated, his voice strained as if the words were being forced out. I'm not sure I have it anymore, honey. It must have slipped out of my pocket or blown away in the wind." Ellie frowned, her gaze sharp as she studied her father's face. She was certain she had seen him tuck the flyer safely into his navy blue jacket, the same jacket that now hung on the back of his chair. "But I saw you put it in your pocket," she insisted, her voice steady despite the tremor of doubt that ran through her. Henry's hand moved to his jacket, patting the pocket in a gesture that seemed more performative than genuine. "Sorry, darling, it's not there anymore." He added quickly, his words spilling out in a hurry. "It's probably for the best. You'd just get upset if you saw it." Lisa, who had been silently watching the exchange with her fork suspended halfway to her mouth, finally spoke up. "What's this about a flyer? I'm curious too." Her voice carried a hint of genuine confusion, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of, was it concern that mirrored Henry's? Henry waved his hand dismissively, the movement too broad, too emphatic. "It's nothing, really," he insisted, his gaze darting between Ellie and Lisa. "We shouldn't ruin our holiday mood over a piece of paper." But Ellie couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that her father was hiding something from her. He had been steering clear of any conversation about the flyer since that morning. The weight of unspoken words hung heavily in the air, as palpable as the aroma of their cooling meals. In an attempt to change the subject, to pierce through the tension that had descended upon them, Ellie asked, "Do either of you have any of my childhood photos on your phones?" The question, innocent as it seemed, caused Henry to tense visibly. His knuckles whitened as he gripped his napkin, his voice tight as he asked, Why do you ask? Ellie tried to keep her tone light, casual even as her heart raced. Well, she began, her fingers idly tracing patterns on the condensation of her water glass. I posted that picture we took together on social media, and my friends keep saying how similar I look to that little girl in the flyer, like I'm just the adult version of her. That's nonsense, Henry said firmly, his words clipped and sharp. Your mother and I raised you. You don't look anything like that girl. The vehemence in his tone took Ellie aback. She pressed on, adopting a playful tone that felt forced even to her own ears. Come on, Dad. You must have at least one of my childhood photos on your phone. Can I see it, please? Henry's expression tightened further, lines etching themselves deeply around his mouth and eyes. I'm afraid not, sweetheart, he said, his voice softening in a way that felt rehearsed. My phone memory was full, so I moved most of the files to our computer back home before the trip. I don't have any of your old pictures with me. Lisa nodded in agreement, her movement a beat too late to be entirely natural. I don't have any on my phone either, dear. Disappointment washed over Ellie, mingled with a growing sense of doubt that gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. Why did her father keep making excuses and avoiding the topic of the missing flyer? Why did a simple request for a childhood photo seem to sprout so much excuses? As she glanced around the restaurant, seeking a distraction from the discomfort that had settled over their table, her gaze landed on a figure across the street in Pottersfields Park. A woman, her movements purposeful and determined, was in the process of putting up a flyer, the same missing girl flyer her father had taken down earlier. Look, Ellie said, pointing towards the park. There's someone putting up more of those flyers. Henry and Lisa turned to look, their movements almost synchronized in their reluctance. As they watched the woman work, their faces paled visibly, the color draining away as if they had seen a ghost. As the woman turned, revealing her face fully, Henry suddenly broke into a coughing fit, his body shaking with the force of it. Lisa sat frozen, her eyes wide and unblinking, her fork suspended in midair. Do you know her? Ellie asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she noticed their strange reactions. You both look like you've seen a ghost. No, they answered in unison, their voices overlapping in a way that felt too rehearsed, too quick to be entirely truthful. At that moment their food arrived, the cheerful waitress oblivious to the tension that crackled between the three of them. As she set down their plates, the aroma of freshly prepared food wafting up to mingle with the scent of London's summer air, Ellie found herself unable to focus on the meal before her. Let's eat, Henry said. I'm starving. Ellie, if you want to take a picture, please do so now. Ellie stood up from her seat and positioned her phone above the meals. She snapped a picture of her dish, more out of habit than genuine interest, her mind racing with questions and suspicions. As she lowered her phone, she glanced back towards the park, but the woman had vanished as if she had never been there at all. The family ate in uncomfortable silence, the clink of cutlery against plates the only sound piercing the heavy quiet that had settled around them. As Ellie mechanically lifted forkfuls of food, her mind raced. The missing flyer, her parents' odd behavior, the woman in the park, all of it swirled together in a confusing maelstrom, as if there were some hidden meaning beneath it all. As the last remnants of their meal were cleared away, the tension at the Gibson family's table remained palpable. The cheerful bustle of the restaurant seemed at odds with the heavy silence that had settled over them, a stark reminder of the unspoken words and hidden truths that hung in the air. Ellie, still unsettled by the strange atmosphere that had descended upon their family outing, cleared her throat softly before asking, "Where should we go next?" Her voice sounded small and uncertain, even to her own ears. To her surprise, Henry suggested, his voice carrying a weariness that seemed out of place, "Why don't we head back to the Airbnb apartment?" Ellie couldn't hide her disbelief, her eyebrows arching high on her forehead. "Really, Dad? You want to go back to the apartment?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. It seemed entirely out of character for her father, who was usually the one pushing for more outdoor activities, always eager to explore and experience new things. Henry shrugged, a weary smile playing on his lips that didn't quite reach his eyes. "All this food is making me sleepy," he offered by way of explanation, his hand gesturing vaguely. "I'm not as young as I used to be, you know." The excuse rang hollow in Ellie's ears, but she nodded slowly, her mind racing to make sense of this latest oddity in a day filled with strange occurrences. They paid the bill, and as they rose from the table, Ellie couldn't help but notice how her parents seemed to move with an urgency that belied Henry's claim of tiredness. They set off towards their Airbnb apartment, a short 10-minute walk from the restaurant. The streets of London stretched before them, a tapestry of old and new, the city's rich history evident in every cobblestone and centuries-old building, but Ellie found herself unable to appreciate the sights around her, her mind too preoccupied with the growing list of questions that demanded answers. As they approached the apartment building, a familiar figure caught Ellie's attention. Her heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the woman from the park, now posting flyers just outside their building. The woman's movements were methodical, each flyer placed with care, her face a mask of determination tinged with a deep, abiding sadness. Without thinking, Ellie approached her, drawn by an inexplicable pull she couldn't quite understand. "I hope you find your missing girl, ma'am," she said softly, her hand reaching out to gently tap the woman's shoulder. The woman turned, her eyes widening in confusion as they met Ellie's. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Ellie felt a jolt of recognition, though she couldn't place why this stranger's face seemed so familiar, so important. Before Ellie could say anything more, she felt hands on her shoulders, pulling her back. Henry and Lisa had appeared beside her, their movements almost frantic as they ushered her into the building. Ellie stumbled slightly, caught off guard by their urgency. "What are you doing?" Lisa hissed, her voice low and strained as they entered the lobby. "You can't just approach strangers like that." Ellie opened her mouth to protest, to point out that she had merely been expressing sympathy, but the words died on her lips as she caught sight of her parents' faces. Fear, raw and unmistakable, was etched into every line of their features. They rode the elevator in silence, the soft ding of passing floors, the only sound breaking the tense quiet. Ellie's mind whirled, trying to make sense of her parents' reaction. It was as if they were afraid of something or someone. Once inside their unit, an uncomfortable silence settled over the family. Henry and Lisa moved about the space with an air of forced casualness, putting down their belongings and tidying up with movements that seemed too deliberate, too controlled. Henry shrugged off his jacket. He draped it over the sofa before unbuttoning the collar of his shirt beneath the jacket. "Your mother and I are going to rest for a bit," he announced, his voice carrying a forced lightness. "Maybe we can continue our sightseeing later in an hour." Before Ellie could respond, Henry and Lisa had disappeared into the bedroom, the door closing behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet of the apartment. Left alone in the living room, Ellie sank onto the couch, her mind racing. She unlocked her phone, scrolling through more comments on her post. The observations about her resemblance to the missing girl had only increased, each one sending a chill down her spine. She typed out a reply, trying to deflect attention with a joking emoticon. "You guys are missing the focus of the picture." But even as she hit send, she knew the lightness of her words was a poor mask for the turmoil she felt inside. As she set her phone down, her eyes fell on Henry's jacket, carelessly thrown over the arm of the sofa. It lay there, innocuous and unremarkable, and yet Ellie felt drawn to it, as if it held the answers to all the questions swirling in her mind. Almost without realizing what she was doing, Ellie found herself reaching for the jacket, her hands trembling slightly as they searched the pockets. Her breath caught in her throat as her fingers brushed against paper. The missing person flyer was still there, along with the magnetic photo print from that morning. Heart pounding, Ellie glanced towards her parents' closed bedroom door. She could hear the low murmur of their voices, though the words were indistinct. Knowing she had little time, she hurried to her own room, closing the door quietly behind her. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Ellie unfolded the flyer with trembling hands. The paper felt rough against her fingers, the weight of it somehow more significant than it should be. She ran her fingers over the printed image, taking in details she hadn't been able to see clearly in the low-resolution digital copy of her social media post. The little girl's face stared back at her, eyes wide and innocent, a smile frozen in time. But it was the date in small prints that caught Ellie's eye, making her gasp audibly. 2005. The realization hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. Not only did the girl look strikingly similar to her, but she would be exactly Ellie's age now. Ellie thought that if only she could find a picture from her childhood, it would confirm and ease her mind. Perhaps she was just overthinking the situation. As she considered where she might find the childhood photo, an idea struck her. With trembling hands, Ellie opened her social media app again, this time navigating to her father's profile. She scrolled through years of posts, each swipe revealing another layer of what she had always believed to be her life, until she reached the oldest ones. There, staring back at her from the screen, was a photo of herself from a few years after the age of the missing girl. Ellie's heart seemed to stop as she looked at it, really looked at it for the first time. The resemblance was undeniable, unmistakable. In that moment, as Ellie sat on her bed in a rented apartment in London, thousands of miles from the life she had always known, the foundations of her world began to crumble. Questions she had never considered before now demanded answers. Why was there a picture of her here in London, so far from the US, and why had her parents been acting so suspicious since the morning? Was there something they weren't telling her? Was there something she needed to know? With a determination born of desperation, Ellie snapped a close-up picture of the flyer with her phone. Her hands shook as she carefully folded the paper, creasing it along the same lines it had been before. She stepped out of her room, her movements cautious and deliberate. With utmost care, she returned the flyer to Henry's jacket pocket, arranging it exactly as she had found it. Each movement felt weighted with significance, as if she were handling not just a piece of paper, but a key to unlocking the truth of her existence. Ellie stood before her parents' bedroom door, one hand resting on the handle while the other hovered, ready to knock. She wanted answers, even if she suspected they would only provide more excuses, or perhaps even be angry with her for disturbing their rest. But just as her knuckles hovered inches from the wood, she heard muffled voices coming from within. Her hand froze and she found herself leaning closer, pressing her ear against the door. The cool surface of the wood contrasted sharply with the heat of her flushed cheek as she strained to make out the words being spoken on the other side. The muffled voices from behind the closed bedroom door grew clearer as Ellie pressed her ear against the cool wood, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might drown out the conversation within. But the words came through, each one a dagger to her heart, shattering the last remnants of the life she thought she knew. She keeps asking about that missing girl photo. Henry's voice, tinged with panic, reached her ears. The fear in his tone was palpable, a stark contrast to the confident, reassuring father she had always known. There's no way she could find out, right? Lisa's reply was softer but no less devastating. It's either we tell her, or one day she'll find out on her own. She'll hate us, Henry. The resignation in her voice spoke of a burden carried for far too long, a secret that had weighed heavily on her conscience. We've loved her enough, Henry insisted, his words carrying a desperate edge. She won't betray us. There was a pause, heavy with unspoken truths, and then Lisa's voice, heavy with the weight of a long-held secret. We kidnapped her, Henry. She would hate us. This holiday is a mistake. Coming back here to London, Henry replied. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the shocking truth hit Ellie. She felt her chest constrict, realizing she had been holding her breath. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the room spinning as the implications of what she had just heard crashed over her like a tidal wave. In her shock, Ellie stumbled slightly, her hand accidentally pushing against the door handle. The door swung open with a soft creak, revealing Henry and Lisa, their faces masks of shock and horror, as they realized Ellie had been listening. Time seemed to stand still as they stared at each other, the truth hanging in the air between them like a physical presence. Ellie felt as if she were looking at strangers, the familiar features of her parents' faces suddenly alien and threatening. Mom, Dad, Ellie's voice trembled, barely above a whisper. The words felt wrong in her mouth, a lie she had unknowingly been living for 18 years. What were you talking about? Henry's face paled, the color draining away as if he had seen a ghost. But even in his panic, He attempted to cover with another lie, his words stumbling out in a rush. "We weren't talking about you, sweetheart. It was about the neighbor's child, But Ellie had reached her breaking point. Hours of doubt and confusion, culminating in this day of half-truths and evasions, finally boiled over. "Stop lying to me," she cried, her voice cracking with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling over to trace hot paths down her cheeks. "You've been lying all day, all hours. I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm not stupid. Just tell me the truth." The force of her outburst seemed to physically push Henry back. His shoulders sagged, defeat written across his features. "It was for your own good," he said weakly, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. "We can explain everything." "You'd better," Ellie replied, her voice hard with anger and hurt. She crossed her arms over her chest, as if trying to hold herself together, as her world fell apart around her. Over the next hour, in halting, guilt-laden words, Henry and Lisa unraveled the tapestry of lies they had woven around Ellie's life. The living room of the Airbnb apartment became a confessional, the truth spilling out in a torrent of words that seemed to physically fill the space between them. They told her of that fateful day in Hyde Park, London, when she was just 3 years old, how they had stalked her family for days, planning the perfect moment to snatch her away. Each word was a blow, chipping away at the foundation of Ellie's identity. "It was a busy afternoon," Henry explained, his voice hollow, eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond Ellie. "Your real parents were chatting with another couple. You were playing near a small ice cream stand." Lisa picked up the thread of the story, her eyes brimming with tears that she made no attempt to wipe away. "I pretended to trip and spill a drink near your parents. It was just enough of a distraction. And I walked up to you," Henry continued, his gaze finally meeting Ellie's, the pain in his eyes matching the ache in her heart. "Promised to take you for ice cream. You were such a good girl, so trusting. You didn't resist at all." They spoke of fake documents hastily arranged, of a flight to the United States, of changing her name from Sarah Wells to Ellie Gibson, of building a life around a stolen child. Each revelation was another blow, dismantling the life Ellie had known piece by piece. As they talked, Ellie felt as if she were floating outside of herself, watching this scene play out from a distance. The apartment, which had felt cozy and familiar just hours ago, now seemed alien and threatening. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick and oppressive. "You're crazy," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You're criminals." Henry reached out as if to touch her, but Ellie flinched away. The movement, small as it was, spoke volumes. The trust that had once existed between them had been irreparably shattered. "We love you," Henry pleaded, his hand falling limply to his side. "These 18 years we've been a family. We've cared for you, provided for you. We always believed you'd have a better life with us." But Ellie was beyond consolation. The hurt and betrayal were too raw, too overwhelming. "Just because we lived as a family for a long time doesn't mean you're not child kidnappers," she spat, each word dripping with venom. "It doesn't mean we're really family." Lisa tried to interject, her voice quavering. "What do you mean, Ellie?" "We are family. We love each other. Family doesn't have to be blood relatives. There's so many—" But Ellie cut her off, her words sharp and final. "I loved you both, but now I don't want to be family with kidnappers who've been lying to me for 18 years. I'm going to the police station now, and I'm reporting you both." The color drained from Henry and Lisa's faces as the reality of the situation sank in. Panic flashed in Henry's eyes, and he took a step towards Ellie. "I'm afraid I can't let you go now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Ellie backed away, her eyes wide with disbelief. The man before her bore little resemblance to the loving father she had known. In his place stood a desperate criminal, cornered and unpredictable. "You're out of your mind," she said, her voice shaking. "You can't just keep me here. You'll go to jail for this." But as she turned to flee the apartment, Henry's hand shot out, grabbing her arm with bruising force. "Yes, I can," he growled, his face contorted with a mixture of desperation and misguided love. because I love you too much to let you ruin our family." In that moment, as Ellie struggled against the iron grip of the man she had called father for 18 years, she realized that the life she had known was truly over. Whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. The truth, long buried and hidden, had finally come to light, and its revelation would set in motion a chain of events that would alter the course of not just Ellie's life, but the lives of everyone involved in this tangled web of lies and stolen identity. The tension in the room was dense, thick enough to cut with a knife. Ellie's eyes darted between Henry and Lisa, searching for any sign of the loving parents she thought she knew. But all she saw were strangers, kidnappers who had stolen her life. The realization hit her anew with each passing second, each labored breath she took. "Let me go," Ellie cried, her voice raw with emotion. She struggled against Henry's grip, her free hand pushing against his chest. "I'm not your prisoner. You can't do this." Henry's face was a mask of determination and fear, his eyes wild with a desperation Ellie had never seen before. "We need to sit down and discuss this," he said, his voice strained, barely controlled. "We love you, Ellie. We didn't treat you like a prisoner. We can't let you throw away all the good things that we've built." The words that had once been comforting now rang hollow in Ellie's ears. Love. How could they claim to love her when everything had been built on a lie? The life they had created felt like a house of cards, and Ellie could sense it collapsing around her. And now they said she wasn't their prisoner. But what was a prison? Even the most beautiful house they had built for her still felt like a prison now, because they had taken her away from her real parents. Ellie's fear quickly turned to anger, a white-hot rage that burned through her veins. She lashed out, both physically and verbally. "I hate you!" she screamed, tears streaming down her face, leaving hot trails on her cheeks. "You're liars, child kidnappers." The words seemed to snap something in Henry. His hand rose, and before anyone could react, he slapped Ellie across the face with such force that her lips split, a trickle of blood running down her chin. The sound of the slap echoed in the suddenly silent room, a physical manifestation of the violence that had been done to Ellie's life. Ellie cried out in pain and shock, her hand flying to her stinging cheek. She tasted blood, metallic and warm on her tongue. Even Lisa gasped, frozen in horror at the scene unfolding before her. Taking advantage of Ellie's momentary stunned state, Henry roughly pulled her towards the bathroom. His grip was bruising, his movements jerky and uncontrolled. With a forceful shove, he pushed her inside and quickly locked the door. Ellie stumbled, catching herself on the sink. The cold porcelain beneath her hands was a stark contrast to the heat of her flushed skin. She spun around, pounding on the door with her fists.